3 Somali Americans are accused of plotting to join the Islamic State terrorist group. How fatal medical errors have become a global problem. We'll have a report. And Facebook under fire. Will a meeting between Mark Zuckerberg and conservative leaders convince critics to hit the like button? Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Africa is now a major frontline battleground in the global fight against terrorism. In recent years, Islamist militant groups like Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab have terrorized countries on both coasts of the continent. The U.S. Africa Command, or AFRICOM, is working through multinational exercises and military-to-military engagements to help strengthen relationships with its African partner nations to help build the defense capability and capacity of their security forces. VOA Pentagon correspondent Calabab is standing by live via Skype in Brussels, Belgium, where she spoke Tuesday with AFRICOM Staff Commander, U.S. Army General David Rodriguez, and other AFRICOM officials. Carla, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Vincent?
Fine. Now, tell us first what the General had to say about the fight against terrorism in Africa.
Well, Vincent, the general was very concerned about the growing threats in Africa, and he wanted to stress that the entire globe is looking more toward Africa and how they can help. I actually learned from one of his deputies, his spokesman, Colonel Mark Shield, that the United States has actually looked at about 11 different locations for a potential second base in Africa. As you know, Djibouti is where the United States is based now, and then the AFRICOM has their headquarters right here in Europe. But the possibility is out there that a second base may be needed. I tried to press him and say, okay, well, where have you been looking? What 11 locations are there? And he wouldn't tell me, but he would tell me that one of the locations is not Nigeria, despite all the increased efforts between the United States and Nigeria to fight Boko Haram. He said that that's not where they're looking at, that there are several different areas, and that the Chad, the group of 5, Chad, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, and Benin, when they start to join this group, will be there to fight, and the United States is going to remain as a support, not necessarily needing a base there. But pretty big news that the United States would even be considering a second base in Africa, because this is something that's not really been talked about before.
Indeed. And what was the general and the other officials doing there in Brussels today?
Well, the general is here in Europe and here in Brussels because the United States and the EU are close allies on anything that goes on in Africa. He was explaining to me just how active the European Union is in Africa. He said about 88% of the military budget of the European Union is in Africa, 84% of the military personnel, and 10 of the 17 global operations that the EU has are right in the African continent. So whenever the United States wants to do something to help Africans, they first talk to the Africans, but then they're also at the same time talking to the European Union.
And I thought it's rather interesting you're saying that the focus is not just Nigeria, but the U.S., along with the Europeans, are looking at all these other places where militancy is growing. And that is a different approach, right?
Oh, yes. The general even talked about Somalia. He said, yes, you may have seen an uptick in United States activity, but that's because the Somali forces are starting to get stronger and stronger, and as they perform more, he says that the United States is going to be a support role there. He said the United States has been conducting several training exercises with the Nigerians. He mentioned that a 3rd battalion of Nigerians just graduated, and also some of their intelligence corps is being trained by the United States to help them get better intelligence and surveillance against Boko Haram. And then he could not leave out ISIS, the Islamic State in Libya. He said that there are several African nations that have been focusing on protecting the outside of Libya, Tunisia being one of them, Chad being another, making sure that the Islamic State fighters cannot get in or out of Libya, and then focusing on the European countries. The Italians have been huge, trying to stop the Islamic State there. The United States trying to stop the Islamic State there. The U.S. does have a presence in Libya, not a military presence per se, but they are there trying to fight the Islamic State, and they are trying to work with the government to form a strong foothold, because essential for the government to be able to build its own army before and to combine those militias that are in Libya before the Islamic State can be pushed out.
Indeed, and we saw that commitment from the U.S. and the Europeans to help get the government there some equipment. Thanks a lot, Carla. Thanks for reporting for us from Brussels. That is VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb reporting live via Skype from Brussels. Now, the U.S. federal trial of 3 Somali-American men accused of plotting to join the Islamic State militant group is now in its 2nd week in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The 3 men, Mohammed Farah, 22, Guled Omar, 21, and Abdurrahman Daoud, 22, could face the possibility of 15 years to life in prison for conspiring to commit murder outside the U.S. The men all pleaded not guilty to the charges. Faduma Hussein, the mother of Guled Omar, told VOA Somali Service she believes the FBI is dividing the young men and turning them on each other.
They're using the young men to falsely testify on each other. The witness, Abdullahi Yusuf, was reading false and fabricated statements given to him by FBI.
Sadiq Warfa, member of Somali-American activist group, told VOA Somali Service the community is not on trial and the law says you are innocent till proven guilty.
This is one of the biggest terror trials going in the country. So we have to be very careful. So we have to wait, let the process work itself. We have a jury system. I think the defense will make their case. But I want to make it very clear, the Somali American community is not on trial. These are a few individual young men, and our legal system here is you are innocent till proven guilty.
The 3 defendants are accused of meeting numerous times from March 2014 to April 2015 to look for the best way to travel to Syria to join the terror group, but they were all stopped by law enforcement before they could board the planes. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, violence remains rampant despite the presence of UN peacekeepers known as MINUSCO. The peacekeepers helped to defeat Congo's most powerful armed group, the M23 insurgency, in 2013. Today, the UN forces is working with the Congolese military to defeat the allied Democratic Forces, a rebel group originally based in western Uganda. But over the years, the militants have established bases in the DRC. Since the late 1990s, the ADF has operated in the DRC's North Kivu province near the border with Uganda. Now, repeated military offensive against the ADF has severely affected it, but it has been able to regroup because its recruitment and financial networks remain intact.
A joint operation, offensive one, against the ADF in the vicinity of Eringeti. This is a major offensive which is now conducted jointly by FRDC, supported by MONUSCO forces, on the ground, also with our helicopters and all our assets. Combats are ongoing just behind us. We have just used our artillery, and we have now troops in contact, as you said, and we are going to continue this operation.
Now, the United Nations and the Congolese government blame the ADF for murdering hundreds of civilians near Beni since 2014. They estimate the group's size to be a few hundred fighters. Now, the 5-year-old war in Syria is the focus of diplomats Tuesday in Vienna, where the 17-nation International Syria Support Group is meeting to discuss stalled political talks and difficulties in maintaining a ceasefire deal. The ceasefire, which went into effect at the end of February, brought a dramatic drop in overall violence in Syria, but that progress has slowly eroded. Now, the U.S. and Russia are trying to use their influence to convince the opposing sides to stand by the agreement. Russia is a supporter of the Syrian regime, and the U.S. backs the moderate opposition. German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier explains what the Syria Support Group hopes to accomplish during the talks.
Insofern geht es heute darum.
Today is about creating the conditions to better comply with the ceasefire that has been agreed, so that not just the city of Aleppo, but also the area surrounding Aleppo calms down again. And we have to find our way back to the political process. The negotiations in Geneva are currently suspended. Of course, today will be about getting the opposition on board through an improvement of the conditions needed for the ceasefire and an improvement in the delivery of humanitarian aid. to negotiate in Geneva with the Syrian regime about how to start the political transformation in Syria.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met Monday to discuss Syria's crisis. Specifically, they talked about the need to cut off terrorist supply routes between the Syrian-Turkish border, as according to Russia's Interfax news agency. Meanwhile, the UN and humanitarian groups have reported attacks on convoys and thefts of supplies along the border route. Nigerian labor and civil society groups say they have no plans to cancel a strike planned for Wednesday against a hike in fuel prices. The Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress have called for an indefinite strike unless the price of gasoline was reduced from 145 naira or 73 cents per gallon to 86.5 naira or 43 cents per gallon. Now, the government says it recommended the increases to end shortages caused by foreign exchange crisis. Abiodun Aremu, the Secretary General of the Labour and Civil Society Coalition of Nigeria, says the government must first rescind the act imposing the fuel price hike before any talks will take place. Homosexuality is illegal in most African countries. It's a situation that has drawn increasing criticism from many Western nations. Human rights activists, along with church leaders, say that the rights of homosexuals and other marginalized groups should be protected. VOS Paul Ndiho has our report.
In most parts of Africa, homosexuality is a taboo. It's illegal in 37 nations on the continent. Africans who are openly gay fear incarceration, violence, and to some extent losing their jobs. Last year, on his first presidential trip to his father's homeland, Kenya, U.S. President Barack Obama addressed the issue at a joint press conference with Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta.
When you start treating people differently, not because of any harm they're doing anybody, but because they're different, that's the path whereby freedoms begin to erode.
Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta dismissed the issue of gay rights as a non-issue.
It's very difficult for us to be able to impose on people that which they themselves do not accept. This is why I repeatedly say that for Kenyans today, the issue of gay rights is really a non-issue.
In Uganda, an anti-homosexuality bill received mixed reactions in Parliament. The draft law with death penalty clauses proposed in the original version was passed by the Parliament in Uganda in December 2013, with life in prison substituted for capital punishment. The bill was signed into law by the President of Uganda in February 2014. However, in August 2014, the Constitutional Court of Uganda ruled the law invalid on procedural grounds. Ugandan transgender activist Nicholas Mawanda says more needs to be done.
Today you're busy passing a law to, send someone to jail for life. But what if your son came out as a gay person? Would you send them to jail for life?
LGBT activists in Zambia are beginning to speak out about the treatment of homosexuals and other marginalized groups. Zambia's robust anti-homosexuality laws date back to the British colonial era. I recently caught up with Jane Kulaba, a renowned human rights activist, for her thoughts on the subject.
Such kind of issues are not supposed to be discussed in public, and nobody's ready to discuss anything concerning maybe gays, homosexuals, maybe lesbians. They will take it as you are promoting immorality in the nation. So those are some of the challenges that we face.
LGBT rights activist David Musonda says the government needs to create an atmosphere where the LGBT community, government can meet and engage with each other.
When you see even a person who is gay or who is a lesbian, who is intersex, let us not rush to killing them. They are a child to somebody. They are a father to somebody. Let us just look for remedies. What is the best remedy? If it's maybe to have an understanding with them, let us strike that particular balance.
In South Africa, Reverend Patson Kalaba of Presbyterian Church of South Africa says the people who feel oriented towards the people of the same sex should be embraced.
In my view, they need to be embraced. They need to be given space in society.
Across the continent, the subject of gay rights remains a very sensitive issue. But despite our opposition, there is hope and victories for the LGBT community. Mozambique recently joined a small minority of African nations to decriminalize homosexuality. Paul Ndiho, VOA News.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54 and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vincent Makori. Coming up, a new hope in the fight against multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. Stay with us.
This is BizBeat.
You've heard of bed and breakfast. How about Book and Bed, a book and bed hotel? What we offer is the possibility to fall asleep while enjoying reading a book. That's the kind of environment we wanted to create here. KSI is president of our store, the company that owns Book and Bed in Tokyo, and says foreign and domestic travelers fill the hotel, but it's mostly local residents who stay to read, chat, socialize, and then go to sleep, like guest Yuki Hideo, who paid $20 to $30 for a night stay.
I get the feeling I'm in a big house. I think it's nice that I can stay alone if I want to, or stay with others too.
And for guest Yayoi Nango, she's pleasantly surprised by how many books there are. She says, I was worried the accommodation might feel small, but it actually feels like a room. Book and Bed has 30 of these private bunks, and they're totally filled every night. Can you say waiting list? For VOA's BizBeat, I'm Philip Alexio.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
It's time for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with the latest health news. Lino.
For the first time, the World Health Organization is issuing guidelines to help health workers provide better physical and psychological care for the women and girls who have undergone female genital cutting or mutilation, FGM. FGM involves the partial or total removal of external genitalia or other injuries to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. The WHO notes that health workers are often unaware of the negative consequences of FGM and do not know how to treat it. The new recommendations focuses on preventing and treating obstetric complications and on helping women with depression and anxiety disorders. The practice is prevalent in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. With increased global migration, more cases of FGM are occurring in Europe and North America. New international guidelines aim to reduce by 50% the cost and time for treating multi-drug-resistant tuberculosis. The World Health Organization is recommending a new, easier and cheaper treatment for multi-drug-resistant tuberculosis, also referred to as MDR-TB. WHO says it will save the lives of tens of thousands of people every year. Nearly 500,000 men, women and children worldwide develop MDR-TB, and each year almost 200,000 of them die. WHO says the death rate is high because fewer than 20% of the patients receive proper treatment. Mario Raviglione, director of WHO's Global TB program, says a new test and a new treatment regimen could be a game changer.
The World Health Organization is recommending today the only test we have available now for the detection of additional resistance in patients with multi-drug resistant TB that can be done now in one day rather than in 2 or 3 months as it used to be.
The shorter treatment regimen costs less than $1,000 per patient and can be completed between 9 and 12 months. Conventional treatment programs for people with multi-drug resistance TB take between 18 and 24 months to complete at a cost of $1,500 to $3,000. This form of treatment is recommended for patients diagnosed with uncomplicated MDR-TB, such as those whose infections are not resistant to the most important drugs used in treatment known as second-line drugs. It is also recommended for individuals who have not yet been treated with second-line drugs.
This is a critical step for the fight against multi-drug resistant tuberculosis that affects today 500,000 people. We believe that hundreds of thousands of patients will now benefit from this new recommendation.
WHO says the conventional treatment regimens yield low cure rates at just 50% on average globally. Many patients fail to complete what some find to be a burdensome course.
WHO is working very closely with countries and with technical and funding partners to make sure that as quickly as possible countries implement and roll out the new technologies and invest the savings, especially on the short regimen, invested in accelerating the crisis response to MDR-TB.
The new recommendations on the shorter regimens are based on initial studies involving 1,200 patients with uncomplicated MDR-TB in 10 countries. A new study announced that huge numbers of people die because of the mistakes made by their health practitioners. The study shows that medical errors is one of the major killers in the United States and perhaps globally. Here is VOA's Carol Pearson.
If we treated medical error as a disease, it would be the third largest killer in the United States.
A jolting statement from the latest study on deaths caused by medical mistakes from study author Dr. Marty Makori. No one knows how many people actually die because of these errors. The Centers for Disease Control and the World Health Organization use billing codes to determine the principal causes of death. Without a code for medical error, Makori says the problem cannot be studied or corrected. He says it's the only area of medicine that is not documented.
I see a patient with cancer and I have to document the age and stage of the patient and the subtype of the cancer. And that goes into our national registry, and each year, with millions of dollars of investment, we put out our national cancer statistics. All the types and subtypes broken down in this complex report. We should do the same for medical error.
Mistakes can be made when there are too few nurses or not enough training. And there are other risky situations as well.
The most common dangerous procedure in an emergency room today, according to many emergency room doctors, is a patient handoff.
That's when the staff changes shifts or patients are sent for a procedure and their information is not passed on. Makori says mistakes cannot be totally eliminated, but they can be greatly reduced.
Unless we can accurately document the role of medical care gone wrong, we can't really appreciate the problem.
That requires a change in the system so health workers can find the weak spots and work to eliminate them. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
That's our health report for today. To stay in touch, well, find me on Twitter at Lenormudou. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, Lenore, thanks a lot. And be sure to watch Lenore Mudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Facebook's CEO extends an olive branch to conservative critics. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Kenya, police in Kisumu fired tear gas to break up demonstrations urging electoral reforms ahead of general elections next year. In Nigeria, the government seeks agreement with union leaders to prevent a national strike over gas prices. In Burundi, a ceremony pays tribute to former President Jean-Baptiste Bagaza, who died on May 4th in Brussels. In South Africa, 5 Zimbabwean academics who gave up life in their home country to farm win the 2016 Zimbabwe Excellence Small Business of the Year Award. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Hamilton Live is a live audience performance. With live music, you have that interaction. There's nothing like getting that immediate feedback from the folks that you're performing to. They feel it and they respond back to you. You see it in their eyes. You know that you're connecting with them. Like if any form of communication, it's that response that you get back.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Now, the face-off over Facebook's trending topics is what is trending today. The social media giant CEO Mark Zuckerberg will meet with a group of conservative leaders on Wednesday. As part of an investigation into allegations the social network suppressed stories published by conservative news outlets. One of the meeting comes just days after Zuckerberg said there is no evidence the stories from conservative news outlets were deliberately suppressed from Facebook's trending topics featured by news curators. Next up, are waiters a thing of the past? Now, this is the equipment that one Japanese company says will revolutionize table service. Ordering a meal via a mobile app may not seem that new, but link it up with the smart mart on a table, and ordering food yourself takes on a whole new meaning. A tablet or your phone talks to the mat, called paper bacon, which processes the order, identifies the exact location of the customer, and prints out a ticket without anyone having to visit the table. The technology could be used for more than just food service. The system could also help warehouse workers know exactly what products are on what shelves in real time, greatly aiding and increasing the accuracy of stock keeping. Well, and finally, call it accessible art. The Affordable Art Fair was launched in 1999 to increase public interest in contemporary art. It's now held in 14 cities around the world, from Europe to the U.S. to Asia. The concept of the fair has remained the same throughout, that contemporary art should be accessible to everyone, and that no one needs to be an art expert or a millionaire to purchase and enjoy art. First-time buyers also get tips on everything from starting a collection from scratch to the best ways to display newly bought treasures. And that is what is trending today. Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, African News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Sounds like this idiom has something to do with eggs. Or does it?
Egg someone on.
Oh, hey, did you see? Kelly brought a cake in for her birthday.
Yeah, I saw. Vanilla cake, too. My favorite. But, you know, I'm on a diet.
Oh, come on. It's homemade vanilla cake. Just have a small piece.
Now you're just egging me on. Okay, fine. Just a small taste.
To egg a person on means to urge them to do something that they probably should not do. The word egg in this idiom actually comes from the word edge. If you're egging someone on, you're pushing them forward as if toward an edge. And that's English in a Minute.